Hey everybody, this is the Mage of Ancients, and I'm here with my Pendulum Kali-Yuga deck profile that I piloted for my first ever OTS championship. If you guys have been following me on my social media platforms, you'll know that I actually participated in my first ever OTS championship this past weekend. And I did not do very well. I ended up placing second to last. Actually, one of my opponents recommended that I don't play Pendulum Kali-Yuga ever again. I think what my opponent was trying to tell me is that when it comes to a Kali-Yuga build of a Pendulum-based deck, then you basically, after you resolve Kali-Yuga's effect that basically shuts down all effects on the field, then you basically have only one turn to follow up your plays in order to push for an OTK. So after this deck profile goes up, I'm going to be putting aside the Kali-Yuga build of a Pendulum deck for now, and I'm just going to stick with the Pendulum Magician build that I actually like. By the way, I'm going to come up with that build of Pendulum Magicians sometime later on, I think next month. But until then, I figured that it's only fair to show you guys the deck build that I actually used in the OTS Championship. So, here it is. My Pendulum Kali-Yuga deck that I used for my first ever OTS Championship. Before I get started, guys, I'm going to tell you all that I decided to just save the explanations, well, save most of the explanations for when I do my more stable Pendulum Magician deck profile. But here it is anyway. I'm going to start off with the monsters, of course. And of course, we have the standard 3 copies of Harmonizing Magician and 3 copies of Wisdom Eye Magician. And then after that, the engines, I run 3 Chronograph Sorcerer and 1 Time Gazer Magician. And then the Mythical Beast engine, 3 Master Cerberus and Jackal King. I'm starting to see a lot of people run Basilisk along with these 2 monsters. And I think we're going to save that for my other deck profile for Pendulum Magicians. Then after that, the Supreme King engine, of course. 3 Dark Worm and 1 Supreme King Gate 0. See right there? Yeah. And this is a card that I actually included last minute just because I saw a lot of other people use it in their Pendulum Kali-Yuga build. Also, it's a dark monster, so I decided to include Abyss Actor Curtain Raiser. Personally, I would have liked to take this card out just because it only works if you control no monsters, and I'd much rather go for the Supreme King engine rather than just starting off my combos with Curtain Raiser. And for the single Pendulum Magicians, I run Purple Poison, Oath Dragon, Shankai, and Dragon Pit. Oath Dragon, I did not realize how good of a card it actually is when it's in the Pendulum zone. So Oath Dragon actually lets you recycle one of your Pendulum Magicians from your extra deck, like Harmonizing Magician, excuse me. And now for the regular monsters that I run in my main deck, of course I run the Phantom Knights, Ancient Cloak, Silent Boots, and 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joy Spring. The reason why I decided to go with Ash Blossom over Droll and Logbird is because it can work against either sending a card from your deck to your graveyard, searching from your deck, or special summoning from your deck. Unfortunately, it did not come out too often, even if it did, it was only good for one time and for one time only. Personally, I would have loved to run both Ash Blossom and Droll and Logbird, or just replace this with Droll and Logbird. But the reason why I decided to go with Ash Blossom is because it's also a tuner, so in case my Harmonizing Magician doesn't come up, then I can use Ash Blossom and another level 4 monster on my field to go for Meteor Burst Dragon, and then special summon the Pendulum monster from my Pendulum zone. Unfortunately, I kind of chickened out and I completely overlooked that, so I never used the Ash Blossom to synchro summon with... I never synchro summoned my Meteor Burst Dragon with Ash Blossom. Of course, Ancient Cloak and Silent Boots are basically used to search out for your other Phantom Knight cards. Ancient Cloak would basically let you search for your Silent Boots, and Silent Boots would let you search for Phantom Knight spell and trap. Spell or trap, actually. Speaking of spells and traps, here they are. I ran 3 copies of Pendulum Call, and 2 copies of Star Pendulum Graph, and 2 copies of Duelist Alliance. I also ran, of course, Phantom Knight's Rank Up Magic Launch, Foolish Burial, and finally 2 copies of Fogblade. Pendulum Call, personally, I would much rather run 2 copies instead of 3 just to avoid breaking. This actually came into effect when I went to Game 3 against Sega's Mermails. The thing is, I had 2 Wisdom Eyes in my hand along with all 3 copies of Pendulum Call, and I got ashed. And so I wasn't able to do anything. And basically my opponent was able to OTK with his Sega's Mermails. The person who was playing Secus Mermails was actually the guy who recommended that I don't play Pendulum Kali-Yuga ever again. So I'm just going to take his word for it. Anyway, Star Pendulum Graph lets you search for your other Pendulum Magicians. Duelist Alliance lets you search for these Pendulum cards right here. Rank Up Magic Launch is for you to go into Kali-Yuga. Foolish Burial lets you send your Supreme King Dragon Dark Worm. That's basically what it's used for. The reason why I decided to go with Foolish Burial over Dragon Shrine is because if it gets negated one time, then you could just use Enlightenment Paladin's effect to recycle it from your graveyard and just use it again. But looking back, I figured that you don't really need it as much. After you use Enlightenment Paladin, then sending Dark Worm with Foolish Burial will be kind of useless because you have to control no monsters in order to special summon Dark Worm from your graveyard. Fogblade. Sometimes people would like to run one Fogblade instead of two, or maybe no Fogblades at all. But I still think it's a pretty cool card. And now for my extra deck. Of course, you gotta run Electromite if you're running any Pendulum-based deck. I also run Underclock Taker, Rusty Bardiche, Zephyr Metaltron, and Saryuja Skuldread. Phantom Knights of Rusty Bardiche. If you guys don't know, I'm going to explain it to you right now. So what you do with Rusty Bardiche is that during your main phase, you could send the Phantom Knights monster from your deck to the graveyard in order to set a Phantom Knight spell or traps directly from your deck. So Rusty Bardiche basically gets you a +2 off of just one card. So what you can do is that, let's say that you still have one of these Phantom Knight monsters in your deck, and you want to set Rank Up Magic Launch directly from your deck. So what you would do is that you would use Rusty Bardiche's effect to send one monster to your graveyard, and then set your Rank Up Magic Launch just like that. And then you can banish your Phantom Knights monster, and then search for your Fogblade right here, and you can set that as well. So like I said, you get a +2 off of Rusty Bardiche, and yeah. That's the main reason why people love to play Pendulum Kali-Yuga. But like I said, after today, I am not going to play this deck anymore, and I'm just going to stick with a more stable Pendulum Magician build. Anyway, going on with my extra deck, one Odd Eyes Vortex Dragon. This is the only fusion monster that I run. For the synchros, I run Meteor Burst Dragon, Enlightenment Paladin, Ignister Prominence, and finally Borreload Savage Dragon. I didn't see Ignister Prominence at all today, except for the last game. Neither did I see Borreload Savage Dragon at all until the last game, until the last round. Enlightenment Paladin I never ended up using, just because I think it's just because I was very nervous, and I felt like that I couldn't do anything all day that day. For the last of the extra deck, I run the Xyz monsters Time Star Magician, Naruto, Absolute Dragon, Raging Dragon, and Duodon King Kali-Yuga. Excuse me. Because what's a Pendulum Kali-Yuga deck without Kali-Yuga? So what you would do is that you could use Absolute Dragon. You just overlay 2 level 7 monsters in order to make Absolute Dragon, and then you use one monster along with Absolute Dragon to send them away to link summon Underclock Taker, and then use Absolute Dragon's effect to summon your Raging Dragon from your graveyard, from your extra deck, and then link up into your Rusty Bardiche, and then you can use Rank Up Magic Launch's effect on your opponent's turn in order to upgrade this Raging Dragon into Duodon King Kali-Yuga. And finally, here is my side deck that I used for the event. 3 copies of Droll and Lockbird, 3 copies of Sphere Mode, Twin Twisters, 3 copies of Called by the Grave, and finally 3 copies of Mind Control. Like I said, I would have loved to put Droll and Lockbird in the main deck, just because having more disruption during your opponent's turn is good. And then Sphere Mode, I only be able to make this once, and I didn't have a Winged Dragon of Ra at all that day. And Twin Twisters, I was expecting to see at least one Altergeist player, but I ended up seeing True Dracos. And that True Draco player, even though I had a set Twin Twisters, I kind of chickened out and I wasn't able to use Twin Twisters at all. Call by the Grave, it was good for the last round of the day. I was actually going up against Orcus Zombies, and as soon as my opponent decided to Link Summon using Link Kuriboh, and as soon as my opponent decided to Link Summon his Link Kuriboh using Harp Horror, I used Call by the Grave to banish that Harp Horror from the graveyard, and then he just passed. Mind Control, I was only able to use it once that day, and I was able to, after I used Kali-Yuga, he just set a monster, and I used Mind Control to take control of that set monster, and I attacked for game. And that was the only time in which I was actually successful in using Kali-Yuga and winning that game. So that's it for this deck profile, everybody. Thank you all so much for watching. If you guys enjoyed this video and you want to help support the channel, then be sure to hit that like button. And of course, if you haven't so already, be sure to subscribe to this channel and ring the bell so you stay updated on my latest Yu-Gi-Oh videos. Thanks for tuning in, everybody, and I hope to see you again.